If you are beginning with your journey with Godot 4 and you have yet to cover the topic about Area2Ds, here is all that you need to know. It is our hitbox. It is the check of collision between two bodies. It is what limits our boundaries in an open map, and it is basically everything you can imagine. Checking on Area2D is extremely important in Godot 4 and is one of the most important building blocks you can learn in the beginning. So I'm going to cover for you the basics of Area2Ds and show you how you can use them to build the project of your dreams. So first of all, we are going to cover how to create an Area2D. Then we're going to check collision with this area. Later, we're going to cover a bit more advanced the layers of an area. And after that, I'm going to show you as well what groups are, how to make groups and what they are for and how they can be used. As you can see, we are on a completely empty scene. What we're going to do now is create a new 2D scene. And of course, since this is going to be about an area, we will create an area 2D. By the way, I just clicked the Ctrl A button, but you can add a scene by hitting the plus or also by right-clicking the node where you want to add a child node. As you can see immediately, the Area2D is going to show us an information sign. What this is telling us is that our Area2D is currently nothing more than a little point in the nothingness of our canvas. What we need to do to actually draw an area here is add, as the little information sign tells us, a collision shape. That is another little node that we have to attach to it. And you find it under the name collision shape 2D. The collision shape itself is also giving us a little exclamation mark. This is because even though we have a collision shape now, we have not defined how it should look like or how big it is. That you can do if you click on it on the right side where you have the inspector, can simply select a form which suits you the most. We're going to pick a circle shape 2D. And if we scroll in, you can now see that we have a little area in a circle form. We're going to expand this by just clicking and dragging it out like this. And just like this, we have created an area. Please be aware that you can move the area around without moving our Area2D node. This can lead to all kinds of troubles. For example, if you were to rotate our Area2D for some reason, or if we want to scale it differently, or change the position of itself. Note that the area that we drew has quite a bit of weird behavior going on. Make sure that your collision shape is always in the same position as your Area2D. It takes the Area2D point as a reference point. So once you zero this out here, it is always going to be right on top of our Area2D. If you want to avoid dragging this away without the Area2D, which can happen quite a lot, you can hit this little button up here, which is kind of baking them both together. So now if we move the Area2D, we also move the collision shape. Please note that you can no longer move the collision shape without moving the Area2D as well. Good, now to the important part. How do we actually check if anything enters or leaves this area? Like, how do we check on any event? For that, we are going to create something different, which is body. If you look up bodies, you can see there's different ones. There's a static body, there's an animated body 2D, which is a subclass of static body, character body, and the rigid body. We are going to go with a character body 2D. Now, same as with the Area2D, this one requires a collision shape. So we're going to do exactly the same that we did beforehand, and we look for a collision shape 2D. And we're going to add it to the character body. The node that we created here also needs a shape. And for this one, I'm going to use a rectangular shape. Little trick here. If you go and drag this one around, you can see that it drags in all kinds of directions. But if you hit Shift and Alt, you always have a mirrored result. That's a very useful trick, and I recommend you to remember it. Now we have two areas, actually two collision shapes, the Area2D and the one of the character body. We don't have any visual representation of the character body, but it is effectively a body that we can use. And what we want to do is now move our character body into our Area2D. But before we start moving around anything, I want to show you something really neat. If you press play right now, you will notice that there is nothing on the screen at all. We do have effectively an area at around here, and we do have our area here up right in the corner, but we can't see them. For debugging purposes, it's super useful to make these collision shapes visible. This is really useful to see if an area sometimes fires or does not fire, if it's actually really the area is not touching, or if it's just a problem in your code. Now, back to it. Okay, let's go to the next step. We want to move our character body into the area and have a message pop out if anything enters. To make it easier to see and to make it a little bit more fun, we are going to add a sprite to it. So if you look for a sprite 2D and open it up, you can give it a sprite that you have prepared beforehand, and you will see it appear in our canvas. Now, I want to align the collision shape to the shape of my sprites. So let's do that real quick. And also, I want to see the collision shape on top, so I drag the sprite up. Good. But with this, we still can't move anything. I just set up this extremely simple movement script so we can check the collision or interaction with an area. We cover movements in a different video, which I'll link in the description below, but feel free to pause and copy the code if you want to try the things we do here by yourself. Please also note, if you want to make this script work, you would have to go to your project settings, and you would have to make a new input map. This is very easily done. I'm going to cover this in a video about movement though, so let's keep that for later. So if we hit play now, we will see that we can now effectively move our character around. Left, right, up, down, that's fine. But if we enter our area, nothing really happens. So how can we check on a body entering an area? That is to be done in the Area2D itself. First of all, we are going to add a script to it, and we're going to leave the script completely empty. We don't really need anything. What we do need though, if we're having selected the Area2D, we can go here to Node. We have quite a few events that can happen with an area and that we can do with an area inbuilt already. These things that you see here are called signals, and also here it will blow up the scope of this video if I went through the signals in itself. Just so you know, there's going to be a video about this as well, and they're extremely important, but for the simplicity of the video, we are just going to select one of those, which is body entered. And if we double click it, you're going to have a little pop-up window here. What you can see is our nodes that we can connect it to. They must have a script. This is why we attach just an empty script to the Area2D, because this is also where we want to connect it to. If you hit connect, what happens is that our Area2D has now a function that checks if a body enters its premises. And what can we use it for? We can use it for really a whole bunch of things. Imagine it is an area where your character should heal. We could, for example, replenish HP. What if it was a sea of fire instead and we want to damage the player? It could also be that we trigger a cutscene. Or maybe we can use an area to make a finish line in a racing game. You can spawn some enemies. You can really do a lot of things. But what we are going to do with it, and I'm going to leave that down here, what we are going to do with it is we're just going to print a simple message, because that's a simple thing we can set up right now. So we're just writing print and body entered area. So why not? This should already check if a body enters the area and it should write ourselves a text that it happened. So as soon as we enter here, you can see down in the console that we indeed have a body entering the area. And that happens with every time that we enter the area. Note, there's nothing happening if we exit the area. That is something that can be called upon by a different signal. So let's do that real quick. We can delete all this, we don't need it. And what we are going to do is add another signal to this. So body exited, body node 2D. Double click again, like before, and we connect it. And we're going to do pretty much the same thing. We're going to print that the body exited area. Let's play and let's see if it works. So now we entered the body, and now we entered the area. And if we go out, it says body exited area. Now, depending on how you want to use the areas, there's much more scenarios that you can use and do. But this is, for example, a very simple way to set up this area. In the past, I struggled quite a bit with checking the collision between two bodies. But a collision is really nothing else than two areas overlapping or touching. So there's quite a bit of confusion that I had when I started out using areas and bodies. The first one is that their check is going to be different. You can check on an area and you can check on a body entering. This is a world of a difference. And it also has a few more nuances. For example, you can see on body entered takes a body function that enters here. Which that implies is that you can access every information that a character body has. For example, if we would in our character body script add a health bar, for example, we could go into our Area2D and say on body entered, we could now take body health and subtract 1 because there's fire, I don't know. And then we can just print our health. You can just try this out and see if anything happens. So we enter. Oh, we lost a health point. We lost another one. And we lost another one. Like this, for example, you could punish a player if you tap on a field of thorns or anything. Having a check on body entered is very useful if we want to mess with the body that enters. With the onBody entered signal and function, we can actually take information from the body itself. It is important to note that when checking collisions, there's a difference between a body and an area. Obviously, we have a body with a collision shape here as the character body. And we are checking if a body enters an area. It could be that our character is holding also an area component. That could be different things, but mostly this is going to be used as a hitbox, for example, for our attack animation. So if we go in and add a collision shape to this and we give it just a circle shape, let's go outside and actually check what we did here. We drag that a little bit to the side and we just pretend this is going to be a bullet, a magic fireball, or whatever it might be. We could go into our Area2D, to the node, and we could check whether an area has entered our area. Now it is not going to check about the body, but definitely about something else. And we could do this with exactly the same text as we did before, just to showcase that it works. And we're building up on this later on. So let's just test it and we will see if we go and approach close enough with one area to the another, it is going to print the text area entered area. And we keep going, it's going to display the text body entered area. He's making a distinction whether a body or an area enters. Now, why did I set it up like this? Because there's a thing that is called layers, which can be very interesting. Sometimes you just want certain things to trigger the effects of an area. If we, for example, would not like our area to interact with our body, we can do that very easily through the inspector of our Area2D via the collision checks. And this is where we are going to explain a little bit about layers and masks. Sometimes you do not want a certain body or certain area to trigger all bodies or all areas. You want to have some kind of control, for example, which body and which area are interacting with each other. Let's imagine that my character has picked up an item which makes him immune to fire, and my area here is actually fire, and it will damage the player once he goes in. What we can do is, in our inspector, exclude collisions between certain objects. And that is done through layers and masks. So to explain layers and masks, they are like a game of hide and seek. Imagine you are on a tall building and some are hiding on the first floor, some on the second, some on the third, and some on the fourth. And those who try to find the ones that are hiding are also sparsed out on the first, second, third, fourth floor, etc. They can be on multiple floors to find the players, but they can also be on just one. Now imagine you have somebody who's only searching on the first floor and somebody who's only hiding on the second floor. That means they will never find each other. This is basically how you can see layers and masks in Godot, explained in simple terms. If we hit play now, and we are only on the second layer, and we are not on the first layer anymore with our character body, we're going to see that we are not going to trigger, let me go this way around, we are not going to trigger the entered and exited area anymore. What we do still have is, because our Area2D still is on layer 1, we still trigger the area entered area, because they find each other. So with this, we can determine quite a lot on what interacts with what. And I think that is a very useful tool to know about and very helpful as well. But if you need even more control over who sees and who hits and who interacts with what, you can go one layer deeper, and that is groups. Groups are like a family of a defined object. For example, you could make a group of enemies. You could make a group of water. You could make a group of projectiles, weapons, etc. The important part here is that they can pertain to multiple groups. It's like putting a sticker on a box. So that makes it quite easy, because let's take the case that you have two different states: immune to fire and susceptible to fire. That is still very easily to do with layers. You can just say I make two layers, two different layers, and for each layer I either take damage or not. So you could swap between the layers. But what happens if you have like 3 or 4, like you're immune to poison, like you are like you're vulnerable to water and such things? It will blow up the scope of our layers very easily. There's a much easier way to handle things, and that is groups. Your character is like a container, and we can read on the box what's inside the container, what it can do. For example, if we give it the label and the sticker of enemy, this container will, for example, be immune to all the other enemies' attacks, because we, as an enemy, only want to attack the hero. Also, for example, if we have the sticker of fire element, we could make it immune to fire. Like any damage that is of type fire could be rendered useless. And like this, we have a much easier way of giving properties to our bodies and our characters, etc., without having to swap too many layers. And to do so is very easy. You remember where we looked up on the nodes for our signals? Right beside the signals, you have the groups tab. And adding anybody to a group, for example, the group is the group player, and adding is, for example, the property immune to fire, is as easy as putting stickers on a box. We just would have to represent that later in our code as well. For example, let's put back our character to layer 1. Our area is checking the layer 1, very nice, and this area is checking layer and mask 1 as well. Now what we are going to do with our script is on body entered, and we want to check if our body is actually of the group fire, is in group, and we write immune fire here. What we want to do is then print no damage taken. Let me clean this up real quick. No damage taken. Space that in, save. And if we hit play now and run into a project again, as soon as we enter in this field, it says no damage taken. Same thing that we could do is, for example, since we already said that our player has a few health points, we could heal our player. Like we could say body.health equals 100, and we're back to full health. This is as easy as you can use areas, and it's very, very powerful, very easy to use, and one of the tools you should focus on a lot. As I said before, we also have a video about character movement and a video about signals, which go more in depth about those two topics. If you like the video, please hit the like and subscribe so the algorithm pushes it to more people who are trying to learn Godot. I read every comment, so if you have any questions left, or if you wish me to cover any other topic of Godot, just leave it down in the comments below and I will try to cover it as soon as possible.